So, why is it so hard to be successful? And clearly, since I'm a musician, specifically a rapper, I more so mean why is it so hard to be a successful musician, or a successful rapper? But it kind of connects to being successful in general. Now, of course, there's different levels of difficulties because, for instance, let's say if you're trying to be a plumber or a barber or a hairdresser, right? Like those kinds of things are a lot easier to get into, right? Because becoming a successful things that would compare it probably to be being a successful rapper would be like being a successful actor, being a successful content creator, right? But it's those are different than trades and vocations, right? Because anything like that has this kind of pyramid scheme kind of fashion to it, right? There's going to be a degree of difficulty that increases the lower you are on the pyramid, right? And in regards to say like the music industry or the entertainment industry, period, there's a lot of people at the base of the pyramid. Now, in comparison, things like, and it also has to do with like supply and demand, right? Because everybody knows somebody that can use a haircut or that consistently gets haircuts, or somebody that need a woman that needs a hairdresser, or that needs to get their hair done, or somebody with a home that needs to be maintained that they need a plumber or maybe a HVAC person to come and handle the situation, right? So things entertainment has a lot more options, and entertainment is a lot less necessary. It's a lot less needed because, say, if you put a person in solitary confinement, sure they'll lose their mind if they don't have no kind of contact, if they don't have like a that's kind of the point of like solitary confinement in a certain sense, right? But even in solitary confinement, they still have to give the prisoner food and water because if they don't, odds are they're gonna die, right? So things that are more so connected to the maintenance of the body, like a need for food, a need for clean drinking water and all that, a clean water to bathe in, those are always going to be much more needed. And due to how needed they are, there's like even whoever's the best barber in Miami or the best barber in Houston or the best barber in whatever city you can name, whatever major city, right? There's literally no way that that barber can serve everybody in that city who needs a haircut, right? Now, in regards to entertainment, that's a whole different beast, right? In entertainment, theoretically, right, whoever is the best rapper or the most known rapper in an area, in theory, he can serve everybody in his area, right? And everybody in other areas as well, right? And it's not like before because, see, many don't know, but I'm kind of aware of this because I was born in the mid 90s. But, a lot of people probably either don't remember or they might be too young to even know that there was a point in time where there was like a market for local artists, right? But things like the internet has completely changed that, right? Because like back in the 90s, the only artists that were coming to your town or that could be a source of entertainment were the ones that were like major, ones that are big, right? And then that created a whole local market to be available where you would have rappers and musicians in areas, say like Florida, Tennessee, Texas, even in New York, right? That's why the whole mixtape thing ended up becoming a thing, right? Because there was this whole market that was available, right? Due to the fact that there wasn't enough technology and tools to make it possible for the most popular rappers to serve everybody, right? And you didn't have this thing where a rapper can go in the studio, make a song today, and put it out the next minute or the next as soon as the song is done mixing. That's the case now, right? Back in those days, in the '90s and early 2000s, there was like a set time, and once the album came out, that was it, right? And even if the artist wanted to put out a single, that single had to get pressed, it had to get promoted. Or there was a whole process behind it, right? So it's basically kind of like if it's basically you have to picture what would happen to barbers and plumbers and HVAC people and stuff if we reach a point in time where robots can handle the job and robots just need maintenance, and the maintenance for the robots, the amount of money that gets paid to a HVAC person in a month, That's the amount it costs to maintain the robot for a year, right? You would see a lot of HVAC positions disappear. You would see a lot of plumbing positions disappear, right? And it's kind of a similar thing in regards to entertainment. And where it gets twisted now and why it's even harder to be successful is you have this increase in the topper artist's ability to serve everybody, and then on top of it you have more people trying to do it. So picture the same example I just gave with like robots doing HVAC and plumbing and stuff like that and barbering, right? Picture that happening, and then on top of that, more people trying to become barbers and stuff, right? Think about it. Or I guess basically picture if whoever the top HVAC person or the top barber in a city, picture if they had a whole fleet of robots that did haircuts exactly in their style, that did plumbing exactly according to their instructions, right? That's kind of what you're dealing with in entertainment, particularly if you want to be a musician, right? So that's something that crosses my mind a lot in regards to why it's so hard to become successful. But now, the reason why I'm generally asking the question why it's so hard to be successful, I kind of want to take it beyond my specific chase to success and think about everybody's success, right? Because everything is connected to everything, right? Especially when money is involved, right? Anything that costs money is connected to other things that cost money, and that's connected to bigger things that cost money, right? So, for instance, right, the cost of housing, right? Because there's kind of three basic sections in regards to people's needs, right? You have shelter, you have food, and you have transportation, right? Shelter, food, transportation. I'll say it again: shelter, food, and transportation, right? So, with the cost of shelter being so high at this point in time, to the point that the majority of people can't even have their own living space, their own little apartment and car and all that kind of stuff, right? You have more people than ever who have to live with external family members or people who are living with their parents longer than people used to, right? And it's reached the point where parents have like even given up on kicking their kids out, right? Because they know at this point they would pretty much be kicking their kid out to homelessness, right? So that adds a factor into this, right? Because something like entertainment, or say specifically trying to be a musician, it costs money, right? So the money that people have to spend on even trying to stay afloat is keeping them from spending money on creating works or getting music videos done or getting features from artists who are a little bit more popular than them, right? Because they just don't have the money to spend, right? And that connects to why it's so hard for everybody else to be successful at things that they're trying to do and get done, right? Because you have people who, like basically back in the 70s and 80s, right? And you can look this up, you can chat GPT it, you can Google AI it, you can Grok it, whichever one of your choice, right? But basically ask it, what was the cost of living, right, compared to what people were making, compared to the wages, right? And the issue that we have, because basically back in the 70s and 80s, somebody working a job at McDonald's or Burger King or something like that, a fast food job, was able to afford their own apartment, right? Like at least a studio apartment. Like they probably had to save up for a couple of months, but that's it, right? Like the way how somebody's able to save up for a couple of months and put down money on a car right now, that's how people were able to put down money for apartments before, right? But now that's not the case, right? Like, let's say if you had a couple and both of them were working at McDonald's, both of them would have to be managers at McDonald's for them to even afford the average rent price, right? So that's an issue. Like, it's kind of like a basic economic principle that, let's say if you have somebody that likes going to their local bar, right? And every time they go to their local bar, they buy one Heineken and they buy five Heinekens for everybody, well, not everybody, let's say people that they know in the bar, right? If their general cost of living keeps going up, going up, going up, right? That extra money that they had to get five more beers for everybody, they're not getting those anymore, right? That's not happening. Or even worse, if things keep going up, they may stop going to the bar altogether, right? Different things affect different things, right? There are people who can't even afford health insurance at this point in time, right? So it's getting more and more difficult, right? Cars and car repairs, the amount of money people are spending on car payments is getting very ridiculous, right? And on top of that, there are states at least the majority of states. I'm not sure which ones where this is not the case, but within America at least, because maybe somebody listening to this maybe may not be in America, but in America, it is a legal obligation. It is illegal to not have car insurance, right? And the interesting thing about car insurance is that it's really for just in case you get into a car accident, because car insurance, it doesn't cover if your car just breaks down in the middle of the road. It doesn't cover you getting your tires replaced. It doesn't cover you if something happens to like your transmission or something, or you need a new, let's say if you need a new engine or carburetor, whatever you want to name, right? It's not like health insurance, whereas like health insurance covers certain things, right? Well, I guess depending on like the package you get, right? But these are the issues that come into play, right? Like there was like an economist by the name of David Hume, right? Who I'm kind of paraphrasing it because I can't remember the exact quote, but basically he was explaining that that countries and nations, I guess you can even break this down to like people, right, and societies in general, but he is basically saying that nations don't really get wealthier by because the common thought that people have is hold money, spend less money, right? But he's basically saying that that's not the real thing that makes nations grow and become wealthier, right? What really makes nations grow and become wealthier is creating the conditions for people to do good work, right? Meaning people getting proper shelter, people getting proper security through policing and a law system, right? And people having access to a good amount of food, being able to survive. Because before the Industrial Revolution, that's why progressing technology to the point that we have it now was so difficult, right? Because basically, people had to spend too much time working to survive, right? Because it's kind of common sense that like let's whatever great artists you want to name throughout history, if they didn't have the time to sit down and work on their art because they had to work to survive, there's no way they would have had time to create their art, right? And that leads me into another aspect of why I think it's so hard for people to be successful, because there's three factors really when it comes to your ability to, I guess you could say, to make money, and also as well in regards to like being able to create or go about artistic endeavors, right? You have time, you have your body, and you have money, right? Because in theory, there's, or not in theory, there, let's say a big company, like news companies like CNN and Fox and all that kind of stuff, right? The people who are the upper ups of CNN and Fox, they don't have to sit in front of the computer and put together all the content that's being put on Fox and CNN's YouTube channels, right? They use money to make somebody else do that, right? Now, people who are trying to do the same kind of work that CNN and Fox does, like independent journalists now, they don't have the money to pay somebody to do that. So they have to spend their own time and put their body in front of a computer in order to do that, right? So now here's where the issue comes into play. How does that person who wants to be an independent journalist, how can they be successful at it if the living conditions are so dire that even for them to pay, let's say they have to pay $500 to their uncle who they live with every month, right? Now, how are they going to pay their uncle that $500 unless they work, right? Now, let's say on top of that, their uncle works all day, so their uncle can't like take them to and from work, right? So now this person, on top of paying their uncle $500 a month, they have to get a car, right? Now, either they get a old busted up car that's gonna break down and need repairs and stuff like that, or they're gonna get a more newer car that's gonna cost them somewhere between $500 to $1,000 per month. And whenever that car messes up, it costs them like $1,000 in repairs, right? And on top of that, they're gonna have to get car insurance, right? So where is the time for this person to observe the news, gather together clips, put together reports, and all that? That takes time for them to do, and they don't have the money to pay somebody else to do it, so they have to put their body in front of a computer and do it themselves. But then now the issue is, remember, they got to pay Uncle Johnny $500 per month. Their car expenses per month total to about $1,000 or more, right? So they need to work a job and find some kind of, because they can't just put up a journalism video on YouTube and make $2,000 per month. It doesn't work that way, right? It takes effort. It takes time to build up the channel. YouTube has to recognize your channel and the algorithm and all that. You have to be providing something that people want, right? There's a whole thing to that, right? That goes into the conversation of how to be a successful YouTuber, right? Or a successful content creator, technically, right? But basically, what I'm getting at is if this person who wants to be an independent journalist has to spend at least 8 hours of their day, or let's just say the 40-hour work week, if they have to spend at least 40 hours working per week, which means there maybe about 5 days of the week they're working 8 hours per day, right? Where is the time for them to fully put into being an independent journalist, right? Whereas, say now, let's say some way, somehow, all those expenses and costs were cut down to a fraction, right? Because his Uncle Johnny is charging him 500 based off of Uncle Johnny's cost, right? So let's say costs get cut down to a point where Uncle Johnny says, hey, things are better now. You just give me 150 a month. We're good, right? And now let's say the car expenses go down from being around 1,000 something per month to just being around 300 per month, right? So now his total expenses have jumped to below the money that he even had to pay his uncle before, which is 500. So now his total expenses are about 400 per month, which means he has to work a lot less, right? So now with that being possible, let's say just to make that money per month, all he had to work was maybe around 10 to 20 hours per week, right? That would give him a lot more time to work on his independent journalism, right? So that right there is another aspect, right? So maybe the question is not necessarily because when we ask the question, why is it so hard to be successful? Usually we just strictly look at the one beast we're dealing with, like how I started with why is it hard to be successful as a rapper, right? But really, whether you're trying to be a successful rapper, actor, or independent journalist, it's reflective of the cost and the time you have to spend just to survive, right? So maybe the bigger question is not why is it so hard to be successful, right? Maybe the question is why why is it so hard to even attempt? Why is it so hard to create? Why is it so hard to even pursue, right? Why is it so hard to even survive? Maybe that's the real question. That's all I got to say.